Tamara Love is a writer, teacher, and lover of arts. She's a fan of rivers and lakes, though not necessarily being in them. She's worked as a grant writer and a program director and has taught composition and creative writing at the University of Montana, Missoula College. She currently works retail to support her writing habit and her two canine companions that adopted her. She lives in Missoula, Montana. Please welcome Tamara Love.
Go ahead, kill me if you want to. These words are being hurled at me from my grandmother, who is 86 years old, and she's standing down the hall. And she's looking at me, and she's inviting me to go ahead and kill her. So, it's 2004, January, and I have returned to Michigan to take care of my grandmother. And clearly, it's not going that well. So, I end up in Michigan because, there's three factors. For the past several months, my grandmother had been calling me and telling me that each time I talked to her, she would say, well, I don't think I'm going to last very long. This may be the last week. You should come home and you should take care of me. And so this went on for several months. And then eventually I get a call from one of our family friends who's a bit more credible. And she says, your grandmother's not eating. So my grandmother had stopped eating anything other than really saltine crackers. And she had also gotten sick. So she had like some sort of virus and was losing weight. So she's like, well, I'm not sure, how she's doing, and I think you should come home. And I considered it, and I stayed where I was. And then finally I get a call from my older brother. And my older brother says, hey, I volunteered to go to Iraq. So you're gonna need to come home and take care of Grandma. And I'm like, great. So clearly you can't take Grandma with you, so I guess I am gonna have to come to Michigan. So that is how I end up in Michigan in January of 2004. Now, I was a bit resentful because, one, it's like, who volunteers to go be near roadside bombs? Like, who does that? Apparently my older brother. So, because he was going to Iraq. And then I was also resentful because I was like, my mother had died early, so it's like, and this was her mother, and I thought, this should be your problem. You're supposed to be here dealing with this, and this is how, and I'll be honest, that's how I saw it at that point. And but she had died and had kind of squirmed her way out of it, so it was, so it was left to my older brother and I, and I had a younger brother, but he dying, right? Who does that? But I had a younger brother, and he was like too young to be of much use. I mean, he was like 8 years younger. So it was my older brother and I, and we had durable power of attorney, and so like I could be there and I could take care of medical things and financial things and all that good stuff. And then my final resentment. So I had, like I said, 3 resentments, and my final one was that I get there, and she's not dying. Clearly not going anywhere anytime soon. And I'm like, you have all these people fooled. So, I'm kind of there like a reticent adolescent teenager, who's in her 30s. And not wanting to be there. And so we get to this moment of, go ahead and kill me. And, and I'm not going to kill my grandmother, although I thought about it a few times. But, so clearly we're having some challenges. But eventually, I do manage to get my head out of my own ass, because that was basically what it was. And I'm like, okay, well, since I am going to be here, what can I do? But before I get to that part, it's like I should tell you a few things about my grandmother. So my grandmother, well, she was a religious woman, and so she had taught Bible school, she taught Sunday school, she and as a kid, she was that person that I always loved when Grandma showed up, because Grandma would come, and there were always gifts. And at Christmas time, my mother would get frustrated because my grandmother would show up with too many gifts, according to her. Of course, they were perfect for us. And then, and she also, she was supportive when I went off to college. She helped pay for school initially. But then as I got older, and really once my mother passed, things kind of changed, because my mother had been an only child, and then I was the only girl. So sort of some of the things that transferred from my mother transferred to me. And one of our first, challenging moments was when I changed my major. When I entered college, I had been a pre-med major. But then I was changing my major to become a social worker. And so my grandmother's words were, "You have failed yourself, you have failed God, and you have failed me." So, this sort of wind beneath my wings was who I was going to live with for the next 7 months. But she, so it was a complicated relationship. But like I said, I did manage, to kind of to get my head out of my butt, and I moved forward. So the one thing I thought about once I did that was, well, what can I leave for her? What can be sort of a lasting thing? And I should tell you too, so my grandmother, she did have some health issues, which when I had been there the summer before, found out that she had a heart murmur, she had, high blood pressure, she had cataracts on both eyes and glaucoma, and insisted on driving. And at night, which was not helpful. And then finally, when I was with her that previous summer, she had also been diagnosed as possibly having Alzheimer's. So this was causing some challenges as far as remembering to take medication, just remembering things in general. She clearly needed someone to be with her. I just wasn't necessarily convinced that that person was me. So that was the state of her health. But what I decided in terms of well, what could I leave for her? I thought, for years we had been trying to get my grandmother to clean up her house, and I'm sure many of you can relate to having elder parents who you're like, gosh, I hope you deal with that stuff before you die, because we don't want to have to deal with it. So we had for years, and even my mother when she was living had been trying to get my grandmother to kind of get rid of some of this stuff. And so, but my grandmother had grown up, she had been through the Depression, she had raised her child by herself, she had grown up, in poverty, she had been the child of a sharecropper. So she was used to, for her, she's like, well, someone might be able to use that. And people from church and the community would always bring her stuff, which was horrible, because she would keep everything. And so, but I thought, well, one thing I could do is maybe clear out some things. And so one of the projects that I took on was actually her bedroom. And I thought, well, this would be a great Mother's Day present. And so, I commenced. And in the process of doing so, I found, so this is 2004, and so I found, programs from 1952, where she had done a Women's Day thing, and then it wouldn't be just one program, she'd have 10 of them in case she wanted to share them with other people. And so, and there were Bible, that she had devotionals, and there's just, and multiple Bibles, there's just, and then clothes everywhere, and then she had more than 200 hats. So, so I commenced to just trying to put some order to this. And also just to kind of, my intention was to create a space that since she clearly was going to be spending a lot more time just in her room because she wasn't just moving around as much, but to create the space that she would want to be in. So there was definitely a negotiation process because, she liked to keep things. We might think of it as hoarding, but she would just say, she was a saver. So, I'd be like, you've got a couple copies, or 3 copies of this book. Well, maybe you could just keep one. Well, but what if I want to use that book for something, and it'd be like, well, but we can maybe store it in the basement or give it to someone who might actually read it. Because when was the last time you read this? It's like, so it's like back and forth with multiple things. So there were books, and then there were the tracks, and then there were the clothes, and then there were the hats. But the one thing that she also saved, which I'm sure she would not appreciate me sharing with you, where she had reached a point of being incontinent, and so but she was concerned that she wouldn't have enough of these, of the pads but although she had we had purchased several packages of them, so she would never run out, but she insisted, and so when I was cleaning, I would find them tucked away in drawers and so forth, and it's and so. And I would get rid of them. She's like, why are you getting rid of them? Because you've got 200 new ones, So, but I also could, from my perspective, it was clearly we're going to take care and make sure you don't need this. But for her, as an independent woman, growing up all that time, it's and being on her own, it's for her, it was well, this is how I take care of myself. This is how I ensure that and I began to get that, after a while. But it was definitely this sort of ongoing battle. But I did eventually, over a couple days, I finished her bedroom, and I extracted 26 large bags of garbage from her room that I tossed in addition, and then there were some things I put in the basement. Like I said, it was a negotiation. And I remember I was so proud, because it was this is going to feel great. I got new curtains, new shades, new rugs for the floor. And so, but I had kept her out of the room at some point because she was kind of holding up the process. And so when she comes in, though, the first thing she says, did you throw away too much? And I was like, no, you still got, there's still things downstairs. But my other concern, too, though, had been, will they take the garbage? Because 26 bags of garbage, usually you would need to take to a dump or get a dumpster or something. But gratefully, that morning, they pulled up and they took all 26 bags. I was like, awesome. Please carry that away. But the thing, so eventually, after, I was there for about 7 months, and my brother eventually, he comes back, and I leave. But the thing that I carry with me, because I never lived with my grandmother as a kid, but I have to say, despite the challenges we had at the beginning, I so appreciate that I got that time and got to know her during that space when we were together. So that's it. Thank you.